everyone, and welcome to the Canaan STL podcast today, where we connect you to what matters most to God, people, and purpose. This is Pastor Martin here today, and we have Pastor Daniel, who is out taking a little vacation, going on a trip with the family down south to see his peeps, and today we got a special guest. He's usually the guy in the chair that makes everything happen in the background. Kevin Clements, also known as the Kevinator around here. Kevin, how are you today?
I'm great, man. How you doing?
Doing good. And today we're going to take a little break, Kevin. We've been talking about structure a lot and about polity as it relates to the church. And, you know, Canaan's under some, you know, we're looking at some possible big changes coming up.
Yeah, man.
And some good changes. We think some changes that actually reflect really good biblical fidelity as it relates to like leadership. And as we go to a multi-campus model, this is something that becomes very, very important when we talk about being elder-led. Of course, congregational ruled, elder-led, deacon served is kind of the model in the basics, but there's some big stuff going up. And we've been talking about that on the podcast. Pastor Daniel's been going from classroom to classroom, kind of helping educate our people on what the scriptures say about this. But today we're going to take a little break because Turkey Day is right around the corner here.
Heck yeah, man.
Yeah. So, Kevin, why don't you just start by maybe just telling us, like, you know, what are some things that you're thankful for as you think about, like, you know, church life or maybe family life, being a dad, being a husband? What are some things you're just thankful for right now?
Yeah. You know, anybody who's talked to me in the past couple weeks knows that it's been a hectic couple weeks for my family. Jenna and I moved a lot closer to the church. We used to be about 35 minutes away, and now Google says 13, but I think it's more like 10. You know, so we've moved, and on top of that, there is all the stressors that come with that, but we've still been so thankful, not just for the ability to move and to be closer, but all the little blessings that the Lord has sprinkled in along the way. From there was some financial concern and some folks from the church who wished to remain nameless, but they stepped in and helped us out with that.
Wow.
There was some of that kind of stuff to a bunch of you pastors, a bunch of the guys coming around to help us like physically move stuff. Yeah. I had Pastor Mike taking a door off in my basement and like, you know, just a lot of tremendous blessings on that front. Yeah. On the more personal side, dude, my son Gideon, he is developing, you know, so much more of a personality. He's inching closer to that 18-month mark. Yeah. And just getting to see so much personality come out in him. And so much just fun as he walks around the house and, you know, blurbs things that I'm sure mean something to him, but to us is blah, 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 you know, just being a dad and being a husband. It's a really cool season right now.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And, you know, they say, like, one of the most stressful things on a marriage is, like, building a house. I would also say moving from one house to the other is really stressful.
Dude, I think I read the other day that it's, like, the third most stressful thing, like, in an adult's life. And I'm like, oh, okay, I feel better now.
Yeah, I believe it, man. It's difficult.
Yeah.
And it's tough, especially in this day and age, you know. So, yeah, you know, I think about, like, as a father, like, definitely, Amy and I were talking this morning before I left the house. I spent some time in prayer and in the Word, and she sits across from me on one couch. I sit on the other in the morning, and I said, "Hey, what are you thankful for? You know, whenever you think back just over our lives, what are some things that stand out to you?" And it was interesting. I had something in my mind when I asked that, and she said, "Well, I think it was when all of our kids were saved and baptized." You know, and of course I'm like, "Wow, yeah." That was a special moment. I think back to Noah's baptism was actually back in West Plains, and so was Emma's. The other kids have been here, you know, in St. Louis. But I remember coming up out of the river with Noah, and it was freezing cold. It was in the fall, but it was an awesome moment, you know.
Yeah.
And as I think back, like as a father too, I told her, I said, I think when I think back on our family, it's got to be when our kids were born. There was just that super excitement. I remember, when Amy had Laura, it was like World War III. Like she struggled in labor, and out comes this little purple baby. And listen, man, like it was such an emotional thing. Like I don't cry. I cried when she was born. It was crazy.
I won't take up too much time with it, but dude, so when Gideon was born, we had this whole playlist of like all of these like worship medleys and stuff that we wanted to have on like during delivery. This artist that Jenna and I like, we played a bunch of their stuff during our wedding. I kid you not, Gideon came into this world with How Great Thou Art playing in the background.
Wow.
And
awesome.
It's one of those things that I always reflect on. So like as he grows up, I'm going to have to make sure to teach him that song. Like,
absolutely.
Hey dude, you came into the world to this song.
Right.
Like this is the Lord. You're only here because of the Lord.
That is so cool, man. Yeah. I love it. Well, and we're kind of in a good season of life. I remember just a few years ago, my stepdad was like, "Boy, you guys are in a great season." He said, your kids are doing well and they're healthy. Your parents are still alive, and you're kind of in that sweet spot.
Yeah.
And he was reflecting back and telling me, that he remembers that sweet spot before, the parents got too old and started to pass away and things like that. This is kind of like a sweet spot. Now, 2 years or a little over a year ago, we lost Amy's mom.
Yeah.
And that was tough. That was the first real loss that the kids had as well, and that was difficult. But there's so much right now. Like you're probably in the sweet spot.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think of this verse here, and it's it's something we always talk about at Thanksgiving, but it says, Paul says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, and I kind of want to transition and kind of ask you something a little different here. But he says here in 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 18, to give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Okay, so he says here, in all circumstances. And, we may have some listeners today that they're in a different season of life. They're out of that sweet spot. Maybe they're struggling with loss, difficulty. I was just reading the other day, I think it's like something like 7% or 8% inflation rate that's happening in 23. So like even to like live at the same place you lived in 22 and 23, you're going to have to make 7% more in your income. Well, who's going to do that?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like life, it's tough. There's a lot of negative as well that we could point out, but how do we kind of live like Paul said, in your mind, in every circumstance? How do we have to kind of navigate that and live through that? How can we do that, man, like as Christians?
Yeah, so I lucked out that I was reading this verse this morning. So right when you started asking, I was like, yeah, I got it. I got the answer. Psalm 119:2, blessed are those who keep his testimonies, who seek him with their whole heart. And that could be the Sunday school answer, and I'm done.
Right.
But really though, when things are harder, when things are not going according to our plan, one of the things that we can rest in if we are seeking the Lord is knowing that nothing that's going on is catching him off guard.
Right.
God, if we believe as good Southern Baptists that God is all-knowing, God is in control, his word is inerrant, like if we believe that God has all of the power that we say we do, then there's nothing happening outside the will of God.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, it's easy to say that and to theologically wrap our brains around that, but to live that is hard.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like I said, we were recently going through all the stresses of buying a house, and on probably two different circumstances, there were really, really points where I thought this may not happen.
Yeah,
like that I just didn't believe that it was going to, and every time, thankfully, Jenna nor I were ever having doubts at the same time. Like one of us would be getting like super down and have a ton of doubts, and the other one's like, trust Jesus, and then we'd flip like a day later. Yep. But truly, like, you just have to be able to trust the Lord and say, Lord, like, look, I don't get this. I don't understand right now, but I trust you.
Yeah. That's great.
Like I said, that's easier said than done for sure.
Yeah, right. So there's two sides to that, right? Like you said, there's this theological answer that we can give from the scriptures about the sovereignty of God. And then there's this time when you actually have to live it, right? And those two can be very different. It's kind of like I heard one pastor say one time, he said, oh, it's easy to love your enemy until you got one.
Yep.
Right? Yep. And I think you're right on, man. You're hitting the nail on the head. Is like we have to not just theologize about those things, but when those moments come in our life, and they're gonna, if you live long enough, they're gonna come.
Yep.
Is that we have to live in that sovereignty of God, realizing that listen, no matter what happens, it was the best decision.
Yeah.
And in the end, it'll make sense.
I don't know if you've seen this pattern in your life, but I feel like I certainly have, where it seems like you'll be in a season of things going, according to us, like everything's going right. Air quote, but everything's going right. And then all of a sudden there's some situation, and it could be small or it could be, major. It could be a loss in the family, where God reminds you that like, no, like you're trusting yourself too much. Yep. You need to come back and lean on me more. And I feel like thankfully, every time that I start to get a little too proud and, hey, I got this all figured out, the Lord sometimes gently, sometimes not so gently reminds me.
Amen. It's interesting. This morning I was reading in 1 Peter, and it says here in 1 Peter, and I think we got to kind of remind ourselves of this because, like you said, it can be kind of like a Sunday school answer. Well, what do we do whenever we have a loss?
Jesus.
And how do we stay thankful in those situations, right? But here in 1 Peter, it says here that knowing that you were ransomed from futile ways inherited from your forefathers, not with perishable things such as silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of a lamb without blemish or spot. He was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but was made manifest in the last times for the sake of you, who through him are believers in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are in God. So those who might be kind of like seriously struggling with the thought of, I just lost a spouse this last year, right? No. Our hope is not in the things of this world, right? Our hope is in the redemption that comes through Christ who conquered all those things. Yep. So if the house situation didn't work out, if I have a loss or I lose my job, or listen, my pay rate is not going to match what it did last year, I can be thankful.
Absolutely.
Because of the gospel. And so I think our listeners, and again, like you said, right now I'm saying that from a position of comfort. Yeah. I might get that diagnosis in a week, that I've got terminal cancer. Like
we hope not, right? Lord, please not.
Right.
But
But how am I to live? I can't just theologize about it. Then I got to live it out, right? Yeah. And we're all going to have to at some point in the future. As you reflect back, Kevin, you just think about like all the Thanksgivings that you've been a part of and the different things that you've done in your family through the year. Do you guys have any like things that you do each year, any traditions, things like that? Was there any moment that kind of stands out to you as something that was just awesome your family did?
So traditions look a little bit different now than what they did. So to anybody who doesn't know me super well, I'm the youngest of 4 kids. So, Jenna and I have been married less than 5 years. So my parents are kind of new to the empty nest world, and to all of the kids, bringing spouses or significant others, they're new to some of that. And at least to all 4 kids doing it. And when I think of Thanksgiving, we don't have a ton of traditions like, we always put up like the Christmas tree that day. I know a lot of families do that, or like we always do this thing. I will say that one of the things I feel like does always get prioritized is us being together. Is us finding time for me and all 3 of my siblings and my parents and grandparents, and for everybody just to be in the same room.
Gotcha.
Now,
are you college football watchers, or do you guys just chew the fat?
Yeah, really a lot of the chewing the fat. I feel like a lot of times there's definitely sports talk. My brother and my brother-in-law for sure talk a lot of sports. I feel like there's always these little side conversations. You'll have the sports conversation. You'll have the like Marvel conversation over here. You'll have Jenna and my sister-in-law tend to talk a lot about the clothing website Shein. So like I just, the little conversations that you hear about. I will share that the first Thanksgiving that I brought Jenna around, my other siblings had all been married for a while at this point. So like Jenna was like the last addition, so like everybody was kind of grilling her a little hard. I kid you not. I walked outside to meet Jenna at the car to like walk her inside to my parents' house on that Thanksgiving. And like all of my siblings and their spouses are like crowding around the door and the window, like looking outside. Like you can see them from the street.
That's a great memory.
And they're all just like staring and like being really intense. And then of course, like they're all awesome and super nice, and they were cutting up. And so when she came inside, everybody welcomed her. And that's one of the stories that she loves telling all the time. It's just like, hey, remember when like your entire family like just watched as I tried to walk up the driveway? So
I love it.
Yeah. What about you guys? Do you guys have traditions?
Well, let me ask you one more thing first. And yes, we do. But like, is there a traditional food in your family? Like whenever that one thing shows up or mom cooks this one thing, you guys have anything like that? It kind of stands out to you?
I don't think that there's one like specific thing. I will say that there's, most of the traditional Thanksgiving food, right? Like, with my family, I think there's usually the bigger debate over who gets to cook like the most traditional thing, like who's cooking the turkey, because that's a huge responsibility. Who's getting the mashed potatoes, because that's a huge responsibility. There was an argument a year or so ago about are these box mashed potatoes or not? They were too smooth. It could possibly not be real potatoes. Shout out to my brother who apparently made the real potatoes that year.
Wow, so he won. Yeah, as far as us for like traditions and things, my family on both sides, like we get together, we love to hang out. Usually there's football playing in the background, and so we're having some conversations about it. One of my brother-in-laws, he was football coach at North County, and you actually know him, Justin Marler.
Yeah.
And so we'll sit around and maybe talk some football. That time of year, it's always fun to talk about what's going on in the NFL as well.
Sure.
And so we sit around and we mainly just eat and talk and just kind of catch up and share each other's lives. Kind of a similar situation at my mom's house, although we'll sit around the table a little bit more. But a lot of times what happens is the females end up in one room chatting and the guys are around the TV talking in the other. You know what I'm saying? And messing with their phones.
Yeah.
As far as like traditional food, I want to tell you, man, like there's two things that kind of stand out to me. My mom has this special dressing that she makes that's really unique, and it's delicious, and it's actually got fruit in it. You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So delicious. And then when my brother Mike shows up, he's usually got a pan of these sweet potatoes, okay? And the sweet potatoes have been like cooked in brown sugar, and then he has pecans on top of them, and then marshmallows on top of that.
Yep.
Yeah, and so what I do is I go back and I get the juice, and I actually just pour the juice on everything. In fact, a couple years ago, I thought I was going to go into like a sugar coma. I started to get a little I think my eyes were going bad, But it was a blast.
Yeah.
And so just love to be together with the family. And that's something, too. Don't waste your time, thinking about negative things or whatever. Enjoy that time with your family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Love on them. Talk to them. Take the opportunity just to get in each other's lives and enjoy it. And be thankful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be thankful. Yeah, so, well, Kevin, thanks for spending time with me today in Daniel's absence.
Absolutely.
And hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving out there to our listeners. And Kevin, hope you do as well.
Thanks, man. You too. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
You bet. See you next time on Canaan STL Podcast.